Marcus Donovan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office in downtown Manhattan, staring at the city lights that spread endlessly beneath him. 42 years old, net worth $3.7 billion, CEO of Donovan Capital Management, the firm that had turned struggling companies into empires, that had moved markets with a single decision, that had made him one of the most powerful men in American finance. But none of it mattered anymore, because 18 months ago, on a cold December morning, his wife Sophia died giving birth to their twin sons. The doctors called it an amniotic fluid embolism, a 1 in 40,000 chance, a medical impossibility that became his living nightmare. She was 38 years old, healthy, glowing with life one moment and gone the next. Marcus had held her hand as the monitors flatlined. He had watched the medical team fight desperately to save her. He had felt his soul crack open when they finally stopped and turned to him with those devastating words, "We did everything we could." The twins survived. Noah and Elijah, two perfect, fragile lives that should have been his greatest joy. Instead, every time Marcus looked at them, he saw what they cost him. Every cry reminded him of the silence that followed Sophia's last breath. Every milestone the boys reached felt like another knife twisting in his chest, because she wasn't there to witness it. He tried. God knows he tried. He hired the best nannies money could buy. He created schedules, protocols, routines designed to give his sons everything they needed. But what they needed was a father who could hold them without breaking. What they needed was someone who could look at them and see hope instead of loss. And Marcus couldn't give them that, so he did what desperate, broken men do. He retreated into work, 16-hour days, international calls at 3 in the morning, business trips that kept him away for weeks. He told himself the boys were well cared for. They had everything: the penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, the organic meals prepared by a private chef, the developmental specialists who came 3 times a week. Everything except him. The nannies cycled through like seasons. The first one lasted 6 weeks before she quit, saying the boys were too much. The second made it 3 months before Marcus caught her on her phone during nap time, ignoring Noah's cries. The third seemed perfect until his head of security discovered she was taking photos of the apartment and selling stories to tabloid blogs. By the time the 11th nanny walked out, Marcus had stopped learning their names. His executive assistant, Patricia, had been the one to suggest the cameras. "Sir," she'd said carefully one afternoon, "given the security concerns with previous staff, perhaps we should consider surveillance for the children's protection." Marcus had agreed immediately. Within a week, his $12 million penthouse was wired with the most sophisticated security system money could buy. Cameras in every hallway, every playroom, every corner, except the bathrooms and bedrooms. Motion sensors. Live feeds accessible from his phone, his laptop, his tablet. He told himself it was about safety. But the truth was darker, simpler. He didn't trust anyone anymore. That night, Marcus sat alone in his study, the city glowing through the windows behind him. On his laptop screen, the camera feeds showed his sons sleeping in their cribs, 15 months old, too young to remember their mother, too young to understand why their father felt like a ghost haunting their lives. He closed his laptop and poured himself another scotch. Tomorrow, another new caregiver would arrive. Number 12. He'd already forgotten her name. The security briefing happened in Marcus's office at 7 in the morning, 2 days before the new nanny was scheduled to start. His head of security, James Rivera, a former Secret Service agent with 20 years of experience, spread a folder across the mahogany desk. "Background check completed on Grace Okafor," James said, his voice professional and clipped. 28 years old. Nigerian immigrant, been in the States for 6 years. Currently working 2 jobs while taking online courses in early childhood education. Marcus barely looked up from his phone. Criminal record? Clean, not even a parking ticket. Financial background? sends most of her income back to her family in Lagos. Her younger siblings, she's putting 3 of them through school. James paused. Sir, if I may, this one actually looks solid. Marcus finally glanced up. Over the past 18 months, he'd heard James say that about 4 different candidates. All of them had failed in some way. What makes her different? She's not doing this for access or connections. She actually needs the work, and her references from her previous positions are exceptional. One family said she was, quote, the only person who could calm their autistic son when he had a meltdown. How many previous positions? 2, both long-term. She left the first because the family relocated to London, left the second because they no longer needed full-time care when their child started school. Marcus leaned back in his leather chair. Show me the camera placements again. James pulled up the security schematic on his tablet. 12 cameras total. Living room, kitchen, both playrooms, main hallway, service entrance, and the corridors leading to the children's wing. Every angle covered except private spaces. Live feeds? Accessible on all your devices. Motion-activated alerts. Automatic cloud backup of all footage. If she so much as moves a picture frame, we'll have a record. Marcus nodded slowly. After the nanny who'd leaked information to gossip sites, after the one who'd let Noah cry for 40 minutes while she FaceTimed her boyfriend, after the one who'd helped herself to Sophia's jewelry thinking he wouldn't notice. He wasn't taking chances. What about audio? Per your instructions, no audio recording. New York is a 2-party consent state, so we're visual only. Good. When does she start? Day after tomorrow. Monday morning, 7 a.m. Marcus dismissed James and sat alone with his thoughts. He pulled up the camera app on his phone, cycling through the feeds. The living room, empty and pristine. The playroom, filled with expensive toys the boys barely touched. The kitchen, where his chef was preparing the twins' breakfast. And there were Noah and Elijah sitting in their high chairs, silent. Always so silent. They didn't babble like other children their age. Didn't reach for their father when he entered the room. They'd learned somewhere in their short lives that crying didn't bring comfort, that calling out led nowhere. Marcus's chest tightened. He closed the app. Patricia knocked softly and entered. Sir, your 8 o'clock is here. Cancel it. Sir, it's the Singapore account. They flew in specifically. Cancel everything today. His voice came out harder than he intended. I'm working from home. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. Marcus never worked from home, but she simply nodded and left. The truth was, Marcus needed to see this new nanny for himself, needed to watch from a distance whether she was another mistake waiting to happen. The cameras would tell him everything he needed to know. They always did. Grace Okafor stood outside the towering glass building on Central Park West, staring up at the 30 floors of luxury apartments that seemed to pierce the sky itself. She gripped the handles of her worn canvas bag a little tighter and whispered a prayer her grandmother had taught her. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. The doorman, dressed in a uniform that probably cost more than her monthly rent, held the door open with a polite nod. Ms. Okafor, Mr. Donovan is expecting you, penthouse level. The elevator was all mirrors and soft lighting. Grace caught her reflection. Simple navy dress, sensible shoes, hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked professional, she hoped. She looked capable. She didn't look like someone who'd been awake until 2 in the morning, praying for this opportunity, knowing her family back in Lagos desperately needed the income this job would provide. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer. Grace's breath caught. She'd worked for wealthy families before, but this was different. The space was enormous, all white marble and soaring ceilings, and artwork that belonged in museums. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Central Park, spreading like a green carpet below. Everything gleamed. Everything looked untouched, unlived in. Everything looked cold. Marcus Donovan appeared from a hallway, and Grace's first thought was how tired he looked. Handsome, yes, tall, well-built, with dark hair graying at the temples, and sharp features that probably intimidated boardrooms. but his eyes held a weariness that expensive suits couldn't hide. "Ms. Okafor." His handshake was brief, professional. "I'm Marcus Donovan. Thank you for coming." "Thank you for this opportunity, sir." Grace's accent carried the musical lilt of her Nigerian roots, softened by years in America. "Let's be clear about expectations," Marcus said, walking toward his study. Grace followed, her footsteps silent on the marble. "The twins are 15 months old. They're on a strict schedule: meals, naps, developmental activities. The schedule is posted in the kitchen. Follow it exactly." "Yes, sir." "No visitors, no photos, no social media posts about this household or the children. The confidentiality agreement you signed is legally binding." "I understand." They reached his study. Marcus pulled out a tablet and handed it to her. "This contains all the children's information: medical records, allergies, none, thankfully, emergency contacts, pediatrician details. My assistant Patricia's number is there as well. She handles household logistics." Grace took the tablet carefully. "And your number, sir, in case of emergency?" Marcus hesitated. "Patricia can reach me faster than calling directly. Use her as the first point of contact." Grace nodded, though something sad flickered through her chest. She'd worked for busy parents before, but there was usually some attempt to stay connected. This felt different. This felt like distance carved into protocol. "The boys are in the playroom now with the temporary sitter. She'll brief you and leave. Any questions?" "May I meet Noah and Elijah?" Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, follow me." They walked through hallways lined with abstract art and empty spaces where family photos should have been. Grace noticed the silence. No music, no television, no sounds of children playing, just the soft hum of climate control and their footsteps on expensive flooring. The playroom was beautiful and sterile, every toy organized perfectly, every surface wiped clean, and in the middle of all that perfection sat two small boys with dark curls and enormous brown eyes, playing separately with blocks. Not together, separately. The temporary sitter, a middle-aged woman with a tight smile, stood. "Ms. Okafor, they've had their morning snack. Next meal is at noon. Pureed vegetables and chicken, already prepared in the fridge." Grace barely heard her. She was watching the twins. Noah had stacked 3 blocks and was staring at them with intense concentration. Elijah sat a few feet away, turning a single block over and over in his small hands. Neither of them made a sound. "Thank you, Linda," Marcus said to the sitter. "That will be all." When Linda left, Marcus stood in the doorway. "They're quiet. They've always been quiet. The pediatrician says it's within normal range, but they don't babble much. Don't expect constant noise." Grace knelt down slowly about 6 feet from the twins, respecting their space. "Hello, Noah." "Hello, Elijah," she said softly. "My name is Grace." Neither boy looked at her. Marcus watched for another moment, then checked his watch. "I have calls. There's a list of rules in the kitchen. Read it thoroughly. Patricia will check in at noon." He left without touching his sons, without saying goodbye to them. Grace stayed kneeling, her heart already breaking for these 2 precious children who'd learned not to expect connection. She didn't try to touch them, didn't force interaction. She just started humming softly, an old Yoruba lullaby her own mother used to sing. The melody filled the silent room like warm honey. Elijah's hands stopped turning the block. His head tilted slightly. Grace kept humming, watching him from the corner of her eye. She picked up a block from the pile near Noah and placed it gently on the floor in front of her, then picked up another and balanced it on top. Noah's eyes flicked toward her, just for a second. Grace smiled softly and kept building, kept humming. She didn't expect them to come closer, didn't expect them to respond. She just stayed present, creating sound and warmth in a space that had known too little of both. What Grace didn't know was that Marcus hadn't actually left for his study. He'd walked to his bedroom, pulled out his phone, and opened the security camera app. He watched her on the screen, this woman with her gentle voice and patient movements. He watched his sons, so still, so withdrawn, and waited for her to get frustrated. waited for her to check her phone, waited for the mask to slip. But she just kept humming, just kept building towers of blocks and knocking them down softly, creating gentle patterns of sound and motion. After 20 minutes, something impossible happened. Elijah crawled 3 feet closer to her. Marcus's thumb hovered over the screen, frozen. Grace didn't react dramatically. She just smiled and moved a block toward Elijah, letting him pick it up if he wanted. He did. He placed it carefully on her small tower. Grace whispered something Marcus couldn't hear through the silent camera feed, but whatever it was made Elijah's mouth curve upward just slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. Marcus closed the app and sat on the edge of his bed, his heart doing something strange in his chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope, and that terrified him more than anything. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Now let's continue. Grace spent her first week learning the twins' rhythms, their silent language, the way Noah liked his blanket folded just so, and Elijah needed 3 minutes of gentle rocking before each nap. She followed Marcus's schedule precisely, meals at exact times, developmental activities from the approved list, structured play sessions. But she also did something the schedule didn't mention. She sang. Every morning when the twins woke, Grace greeted them with soft Yoruba songs her grandmother taught her. While preparing their breakfast, she hummed hymns from the small church she attended in Queens. During playtime, she filled the silence with lullabies and children's songs, her voice warm and constant. The penthouse, which had been a tomb of expensive silence, slowly came alive. Marcus watched it all through his cameras. He told himself it was protocol, security, necessary oversight given his history with caregivers. But the truth was stranger. He'd become addicted to watching her work. Every morning before his first meeting, he'd pull up the feeds. During lunch, he'd check in. Late at night, after she'd left for the day, he'd review the footage. He watched her spend 45 minutes, encouraging Noah to stack blocks higher, her patience endless even when the tower fell 6 times. He watched her carry both twins around the apartment, narrating everything she saw. Look, that's a photograph of the city. See all the lights? And there's the park where the trees grow. One day we'll walk there together. He watched her do something the schedule strictly prohibited. She brought in her personal Bible, a worn paperback with highlighted verses and margin notes. During the twins' afternoon rest time, when they weren't quite asleep but lying quietly in their cribs, she'd sit in the rocking chair between them and read softly. Not children's stories. Scripture. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Marcus should have been angry. This was a violation. He'd specifically instructed no personal beliefs imposed on his children. But when he watched Noah's fingers curl around the crib slats, watched Elijah's eyes drift closed peacefully, he couldn't bring himself to stop her. On day 8, Grace did something else that broke protocol entirely. She moved furniture. The playroom had been arranged by a child development specialist. Specific zones for specific activities, everything organized for optimal learning. Grace looked at the twins, who played separately in their designated zones, and quietly began pushing the furniture closer together. She created one central space instead of divided areas. She pulled the toy bins into a circle. She moved the reading chair next to the playmat instead of across the room. When Marcus saw what she'd done on the camera feed that evening, his first instinct was to call her, to demand she put everything back. But he noticed something that made him pause. For the first time since Sophia died, his sons were playing near each other, not together, not quite. But Noah was building blocks on one side of the mat, while Elijah sorted shapes on the other, and they were less than 2 feet apart. In their old arrangement, they'd been separated by 6 feet of expensive carpet. Marcus sat in his darkened study, the camera feed glowing on his laptop, and felt something crack inside the walls he'd built around his heart. She was changing things. Small things, gentle things, things he should have been doing himself. That night, he did something he hadn't done in months. He left work at 6 o'clock instead of 9. He walked into the penthouse while Grace was still there, giving the twins their dinner. She looked up, startled. "Mr. Donovan, I wasn't expecting you home yet." "I can see that." His voice came out colder than he intended, a defense mechanism against the warmth he saw in her eyes. Noah and Elijah sat in their high chairs, eating pureed sweet potato. Neither looked at him yet. "How was your day?" Grace asked gently, as if his arrival was perfectly natural, perfectly welcome. "Fine." Marcus stayed in the doorway, suddenly unsure how to enter his own home. "How were they?" Noah said "ba" today. It might have been ball, or it might have been babbling, but I'm claiming it as his first word. She smiled at Noah, who blinked at her seriously. "And Elijah?" "Elijah gave me a block when I asked for it. Actual intentional sharing. We're celebrating small miracles here." Small miracles. Sophia used to say that, used to celebrate every tiny moment. The first time they held hands, the first apartment they rented together, the first positive pregnancy test. Marcus's throat tightened. "That's good." "Would you like to feed them?" Grace asked. "I can finish cleaning the kitchen." It was a simple offer, a normal offer, but Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd fed his sons, couldn't remember the last time he'd done anything with them besides brief check-ins before bed. "I have calls," he said, retreating. "Important calls." Grace's face didn't change, but something sad flickered in her eyes. "Of course, sir." Marcus walked to his study and closed the door. Then he pulled up the camera feed again and watched her finish feeding the boys, watched her wipe their faces gently, watched her lift them from their chairs and carry them toward the bathroom for their evening bath. She was doing everything right, everything he should have been doing, and that was becoming harder and harder to watch. 3 weeks after Grace started, Marcus's life had become a strange double existence. During the day, he sat in boardrooms and conference calls, making decisions that moved millions of dollars. But his mind was elsewhere, counting the hours until he could open his phone and check the cameras. He'd started keeping a mental list of things he noticed. Week 1, the twins stopped flinching when Grace approached them. Week 2, Noah reached for her hand when she offered it. Week 3, Elijah laughed, actually laughed, a real bubbling sound of joy that Marcus heard through his laptop speakers one afternoon during a video conference. He'd muted himself immediately, rewound the footage and watched it 3 times, his chest aching. His sons could laugh. He'd forgotten they could do that. Grace's methods were simple, almost absurdly so. She talked to them constantly, narrating everything. "Now we're washing hands. Feel the warm water? Doesn't that feel nice?" She sang during diaper changes, during meals, during the quiet moments when she just held them and rocked. She prayed over them before naps, her hand resting gently on their backs. And slowly, impossibly, they began responding. Marcus watched Noah babble back to her one morning, an entire conversation of nonsense syllables that made Grace laugh and respond as if he'd said something profound. He watched Elijah crawl to her when he was tired, instead of sitting alone and crying silently. He watched both twins start to look toward the door when they heard her arrive each morning, their faces brightening. The pediatrician noticed during their routine checkup. Dr. Sarah Chen called Marcus personally. "I don't know what you've changed, but keep doing it. The twins' social engagement has improved dramatically. Noah made eye contact with me for the first time today. Elijah responded to his name consistently. Whatever intervention you've implemented is working." Marcus sat in his office, phone pressed to his ear. "It's the new caregiver." "Then hold on to her," Dr. Chen said firmly. "Children who've experienced early trauma, losing their mother during birth counts as trauma, even if they were too young to consciously remember, sometimes shut down emotionally. But these boys are opening up. That's significant progress." After the call ended, Marcus pulled up the camera feed. Grace was in the playroom building a tower with both twins, not separately, together. They sat on either side of her, taking turns adding blocks, while she cheered each addition like it was a miracle. Maybe it was. Marcus's assistant Patricia knocked and entered. "Sir, your fiancée is here." Marcus's stomach tightened. "Tell Vivian I'll be just a moment." Patricia hesitated. "She's already in your office." Of course she was. Vivian Prescott didn't wait for anyone. Marcus closed his laptop and stood, straightening his tie. Vivian stood by the window, perfectly dressed in a designer suit, her blonde hair styled flawlessly. Beautiful, poised, connected to every important family in Manhattan. They'd been engaged for 3 months, a relationship that made sense on paper. She understood his world, his work, his need for order and control. "Darling," she said, kissing his cheek, "you've been avoiding me." "I've been busy. Too busy for dinner, too busy to return calls." Her smile was sharp. "Or too busy watching your nanny on those cameras you installed." Marcus went still. "Excuse me?" Vivian's laugh was light, musical, edged with something cold. "Patricia mentioned you've been working from home more, checking in on the children more frequently. It's sweet, really, but you hired help so you wouldn't have to micromanage. I'm ensuring quality care." "Of course." Vivian stepped closer, her perfume expensive and cloying. "When do I actually meet these children of yours? We've been engaged for 3 months, and you keep putting it off." "They're not ready for new people. They're babies, Marcus. They don't know the difference." She touched his arm. "I understand this is difficult. You lost Sophia. You're grieving, but at some point, you need to move forward. We need to move forward." Marcus pulled away gently. "I should get back to work." Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly. "Don't forget the charity gala Friday night. I've already told everyone you'll be there." "I'll try." "You'll be there." Not a request. A command dressed in silk. 8 o'clock. Don't embarrass me by arriving late." After she left, Marcus sat heavily in his chair. He and Vivian made sense. She fit his life. She understood business, society, expectations. She never asked him to feel things he couldn't feel. But when he pulled up the camera feed again and saw Grace teaching his sons to clap hands, saw the pure joy on their faces, he wondered if making sense was enough. Friday arrived with Marcus dreading the charity gala. He worked late deliberately, hoping to miss most of it. Vivian would be furious, but he'd deal with that later. At 7:30, his phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. Reminder, gala at 8. Vivian called twice. Marcus ignored it. He pulled up the camera feed instead, expecting to see the nighttime nanny he'd hired to cover Grace's evenings off. The screen showed Grace still there. He checked his watch, confused. Her shift ended at 6. It was 7:30. Why was she still in the apartment? On the feed, she sat on the living room floor with both twins, reading to them from a picture book. They were in their pajamas, clean and ready for bed, but she hadn't left. Marcus called the penthouse landline. Grace answered, slightly breathless. "Donovan residence." "Grace, why are you still there?" A pause. "Mr. Donovan, I'm so sorry. The evening nanny called in sick, and Patricia couldn't reach you for approval to stay late, but I couldn't leave the twins alone, so I'll leave as soon as someone arrives." "Stop." Marcus pinched the bridge of his nose. "It's fine. Thank you for staying. I'll be home in 20 minutes. "Oh, you don't have to." 20 minutes. He hung up, grabbed his coat, and left. The gala could survive without him. Vivian would be livid. He didn't care. When Marcus walked into the penthouse, the sight that greeted him stopped him in his tracks. Grace sat on the couch with both twins curled against her, one on each side. She was singing softly, some lullaby he didn't recognize. Noah's thumb was in his mouth, his eyes drooping. Elijah's small hand clutched Grace's sleeve, his head resting on her arm. They looked peaceful, safe, loved. Grace looked up and started to stand. "Mr. Donovan, I'm so sorry." "Don't." His voice came out rougher than intended. "Don't move. You'll wake them." She settled back carefully. The twins didn't stir. Marcus stood there, still in his suit and overcoat, staring at this scene he'd thought impossible. His sons, who never wanted to be held, who cried when strangers touched them, who'd learned to be alone, they were choosing comfort, choosing closeness, choosing her. "How long have they been like this?" he asked quietly. "About 10 minutes. I was just getting them calm before bed." Grace looked down at them with such tenderness it hurt to witness. "They're good boys, Mr. Donovan. So smart, so brave. Brave. They've been through so much loss. They're learning to trust again. That takes courage." Marcus felt something break inside him. He moved slowly to the armchair across from them and sat down heavily. "The nighttime nanny quit this morning. Patricia couldn't find a replacement in time." "Oh." Grace adjusted slightly, making Elijah more comfortable. "I don't mind staying when needed. They shouldn't be alone. You've been here since 7 this morning. That's over 12 hours. Children don't understand shift changes, sir. They just understand who shows up." The words landed like an accusation, though her tone held no judgment. Who shows up? Marcus showed up for board meetings, for business deals, for charity galas. He didn't want to attend because his fiancée demanded it, but he didn't show up here. "I can put them to bed now," Grace offered quietly, "if you'd like to, if you have somewhere to be." Marcus looked at his sons, peaceful in her arms. Then he did something that surprised himself. "Teach me," he said. Grace's eyes widened. "Sir? Teach me how to put them to bed, the way you do it." For a moment she just stared at him. Then she smiled, soft, genuine, hopeful. "Of course." Over the next 30 minutes, Grace showed him everything. How to lift Noah without startling him, how Elijah liked his back rubbed in small circles, how they both needed the same lullaby, the one about stars and sleep. She demonstrated each step, then guided Marcus's hands, his movements, his voice. It was awkward. Marcus felt clumsy, uncertain, but when he carried Noah to his crib and the boy didn't cry, didn't stiffen, just settled into the blankets with a soft sigh, something shifted. "You're doing perfectly," Grace whispered from the doorway. Marcus looked at his son, really looked at him, at the dark curls so like Sophia's, at the perfect small hands, at the chest rising and falling with peaceful breaths. "I've been absent," he said quietly. "You've been grieving. That's not an excuse." "No," Grace agreed gently, "but it's a reason, and reasons matter when we're deciding whether to keep going or give up." Marcus turned to face her. "You think I was giving up? I think you were surviving, but your sons need you to do more than survive now. They need you to live." The truth of it settled over him like weight and wings both. His phone buzzed, a text from Vivian. "Where are you? You're humiliating me." Marcus silenced it without responding. Grace noticed. "You should go if you need to." "I don't need to." He said it firmly, surprising himself with how true it felt. "I need to be here." Grace's smile could have lit the whole apartment. After she finally left for the night, Marcus sat alone in the nursery, watching his son sleep. He pulled up his phone, not to check cameras this time, but to review footage from the past 3 weeks. He watched Grace transform his children from silent, withdrawn ghosts into boys who laughed, who reached out, who trusted. And he realized something that terrified him. This woman had accomplished what his millions couldn't buy, what his degrees and connections and power couldn't create. She'd brought his sons back to life through patience, presence, and unconditional love. And that meant she had power over the thing he valued most in the world, which made her either the greatest blessing in his life or the greatest threat. Marcus started coming home earlier, not every day, but 3 times a week, then 4. He'd sit in the playroom doorway watching Grace work with the twins, learning how she coaxed smiles from Noah, how she calmed Elijah's rare tantrums with gentle humming. Vivian noticed immediately. "You canceled our dinner reservation again," she said, standing in his penthouse one evening. Grace had just left with the twins playing quietly nearby. "This is the 3rd time this month." Something came up with the boys. The nanny handles the boys. That's what you pay her for. Vivian's eyes were cold. Or is there another reason you're suddenly so interested in being home? Marcus looked up sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, but her smile was dangerous. I'd just like to meet this miracle worker everyone keeps talking about. Patricia raves about her. Even your housekeeper mentioned how wonderful she is. I'm curious. There's nothing to be curious about. She's good at her job. Then I'll stop by tomorrow. See for myself. Before Marcus could object, Vivian was already scheduling it in her phone. The next afternoon, Vivian arrived at 4 o'clock, perfectly timed to Grace's shift. Marcus wasn't home, deliberately called away for an emergency meeting he suspected Vivian had somehow orchestrated. Grace was in the playroom teaching the twins a clapping game when Vivian walked in, her heels clicking sharply on the marble. "You must be Grace," Vivian said, her voice sugary sweet. Grace stood immediately, smoothing her simple dress. "Yes, ma'am, you're Mr. Donovan's fiancée. He mentioned you might visit." "Did he?" Vivian's eyes swept the room, taking in the rearranged furniture, the toys pulled into circles, the warmth Grace had created. "You've certainly made yourself comfortable here. I just try to make the space welcoming for Noah and Elijah." Vivian stepped closer to the twins. Elijah immediately crawled behind Grace's legs. Noah's smile vanished. "They're not very friendly, are they?" Vivian observed. "They're cautious with new people," Grace said gently. "They've experienced loss." "Haven't we all?" Vivian's tone sharpened. "I'd like to feed them dinner tonight, alone. You can leave early." Grace hesitated. "Mr. Donovan usually approves schedule changes. I'm going to be their stepmother. I don't need approval to spend time with them." Vivian pulled out her phone. "In fact, I'm texting Marcus now. I'm sure he'll agree." Grace watched Vivian's fingers move across the screen, a cold feeling spreading through her chest. The response came quickly. Vivian showed her the phone. "Fine, Grace can leave early today." "There," Vivian said triumphantly. "You're dismissed." Grace knelt down, hugging both twins gently. "I'll see you tomorrow, okay? Be good." She whispered a quick prayer over them before standing. Elijah grabbed her sleeve. "No," he said clearly, his first full word. Grace's eyes filled. "Oh, sweetheart, he'll be fine," Vivian interrupted. "Children are resilient. You can go." Grace left reluctantly, looking back 3 times as the twins watched her disappear. What happened next, Marcus saw on the cameras an hour later. He'd been in his meeting when something made him check his phone. He opened the security app and his blood went cold. Vivian stood in the playroom, her face twisted with frustration. Both twins were crying, real, terrified crying. Noah had knocked over his milk, and Vivian was yanking him up roughly by his arm. "Stop that noise right now." Elijah scrambled toward his brother, trying to help, and Vivian shoved him back. "Sit down, both of you. Stop crying this instant." Marcus was already running. He burst through the penthouse door 5 minutes later, his heart hammering. The crying had intensified. He ran to the playroom and froze. Vivian had both twins cornered, looming over them. "Your father spoils you. You need discipline. Get away from them." Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. Vivian spun around. "Marcus, thank God. They've been impossible." "I said get away from my sons." Something in his tone made her step back. Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides and scooped up both crying twins, holding them close. They buried their faces in his neck, their small bodies shaking. "I was trying to help," Vivian said, her voice rising. "That nanny of yours has them spoiled rotten. They need structure, discipline. They need love," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "They need patience and gentleness and someone who doesn't see them as a problem to be solved. I see them as children who need proper raising. You see them as obstacles." Marcus held his sons tighter. "I watched the footage, Vivian. I saw everything." Her face paled. "You were spying on me. I have cameras throughout this apartment, something you would have known if you'd ever bothered to actually visit before today." He turned toward the door. "We're done. The engagement is over." You're breaking up with me over a nanny?" Vivian's voice went shrill. "That's what this is about, isn't it? You're infatuated with the help. This is about you hurting my children. Get out." "Marcus, be reasonable. Get out of my home before I call security." Vivian stared at him, rage and humiliation warring on her face. Then she grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to make the twins flinch. Marcus sank onto the couch, still holding Noah and Elijah. They were calming now, their cries fading to hiccups. He rocked them gently, the way he'd seen Grace do, and whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't here." He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and called Grace. She answered on the first ring. "Mr. Donovan, is everything okay? Can you come back, please? The twins, they need you." "I'm on my way." Grace arrived 20 minutes later, still in her coat. She rushed into the playroom and found Marcus on the floor with the twins, all three of them, exhausted. "What happened?" she asked softly. Marcus told her everything, about Vivian's cruelty, about ending the engagement, about realizing too late that he'd left his sons with someone who saw them as burdens. Grace knelt beside them. "You came home. That's what matters." "I should have been here all along." Marcus looked at her, his eyes raw. "You've given them everything I couldn't. You loved them when I was too broken to figure out how." "You're not broken, Mr. Donovan. You're healing. There's a difference." The twins had crawled to Grace, seeking her comfort. She held them both, but looked at Marcus. "They need their father, too, not just me. I don't know how to be what they need." "Yes, you do. You just did it. You protected them. You chose them." Grace's voice was gentle but firm. "That's what fathers do." Something in Marcus crumbled then. All the walls he'd built around his grief, around his fear, around his broken heart, they came down. He covered his face with his hands and cried for the first time since Sophia's funeral. Grace didn't try to fix it. She just stayed present, holding his sons while he grieved. When Marcus finally looked up, Noah was watching him with solemn eyes. The little boy reached out one small hand and touched his father's wet cheek. "Da-da," Noah whispered. Marcus's breath caught. "Did he just... his first word for you?" Grace said softly, smiling through her own tears. Marcus pulled Noah into his arms, then reached for Elijah too. Both boys came willingly, settling against their father's chest. For the first time in 18 months, Marcus held his sons and didn't feel crushing grief. He felt hope. "I want to restructure everything," he said quietly. "Work from home 3 days a week, be present for bedtimes, actually be their father." "That sounds perfect," Grace said, "and I want you to stay, not just as their nanny, as family. You saved them, Grace. You brought them back to life." Grace shook her head. "I just loved them. That's all they needed, someone to show up and love them." Marcus looked at this woman who'd entered his home with worn shoes and a servant's heart and had transformed everything. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not giving up on them. On us." 6 months later, the penthouse felt different, warm, alive, filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing. Marcus worked from home most days now, his office door open so he could hear the twins. Grace had become more than an employee. She was Auntie Grace, the person both boys ran to with their discoveries and fears and joy. One evening, Marcus stood in the doorway watching Grace read bedtime stories to Noah and Elijah. They were pressed close to her, pointing at pictures, asking questions in their growing vocabulary. She caught his eye and smiled. "Want to finish this one, Mr. Donovan?" "It's Marcus," he said, sitting down beside them. "Please call me Marcus." He read the final pages while Grace watched, her heart full. Later, after the twins were asleep, Marcus found Grace gathering her things. "Grace," he said quietly, "I need you to know something. When you walked into our lives, we were drowning, all three of us. You threw us a lifeline made of patience and faith and love. You showed me that healing isn't about having all the answers. It's about showing up every day and choosing to keep trying." Grace's eyes glistened. "Your sons are the blessing, Marcus. They taught me that broken things can be beautiful when we're brave enough to put them back together. Marcus looked toward the nursery, where his boys slept peacefully. Sophia would have loved you, he said. She would have been grateful they had you when I couldn't find my way. She's still with them, Grace said gently. In every good thing they become. Love doesn't end. It just finds new hands to work through. And in that moment, Marcus understood. True wealth wasn't his billions or his empire. True wealth was this. 2 small boys learning to trust again, a woman whose faith moved mountains, and a father finally brave enough to be present. The greatest treasure wasn't what you built. It was who you became when everything fell apart, and you chose to keep loving anyway. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Remember, love doesn't end. It just keeps showing up. See you in the next story.